Loathsome Things, a horror movie podcast with your host, Josh, his host, John, and today we are talking about Nia DaCosta's 2021 sequel slash remake sequel slash sequel that ignores some of the other sequels, Candyman 2021, Nia DaCosta. How are you doing, John?
I'm doing all right. I'm having a little technical issue, which looks really funny, and it's a good thing or a sad thing that nobody can see me right now except you. And so if anybody's wondering why both of us are laughing hysterically throughout the episode, it's because I look like Mickey Mouse Van Gogh. This movie that we're talking about, what the what?
If you go to Internet Movie Database and look up Nia DaCosta, under her name it lists what she's known for, and she is listed as a writer, additional crew, and producer, because IMDb is a pile of shit now, and it doesn't even recognize her as a director primarily, so cool one, IMDb, going great places.
Yeah, really, really love the new stuff.
This is Nia's second feature film after Little Woods, which starred Tessa Thompson and Lily James. Her third film made headlines last year as the least financially successful Marvel film to date. That was The Marvels. And I feel like that was mostly just Disney kind of doing a shit job of marketing it, because I didn't realize that it was in theaters until I saw a headline saying that they were pulling it out of theaters. So, good job on that.
And what'd you think about it? I didn't think it was that bad.
What, The Marvels?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's fine. It's a post The Good Times Marvel movie, you know? Like, they had their peak, and now it's just kind of a paint-by-numbers thing. But I think she did a fine job. Like, it was interesting, it was funny, the action was whatever. They keep trying to shoehorn these green guys and Samuel L. Jackson's character, and, like, we already saw that didn't work. They had a TV show, like Secret War or something like that no one enjoyed, and then this is playing off of that, so it's just kind of set up for failure, but, like, other than the parts that she had to include in this movie, it felt like she did a good job with it. All of the stuff with Miss Marvel was fun, and the like fandom thing, I enjoyed it.
Well, I enjoyed it too. I thought it was decent. It wasn't my least favorite of the Marvel movies, so I guess that's good.
Yeah, it didn't involve Tony Stark, so that was a big win in my book.
Yeah, no kidding.
This movie stars Yahya Abdul-Mateen II as Anthony McCoy. That's one. He was also in Jordan Peele's Us. This movie also stars Tiana Paris, who was in The Marvels, as Brianna Cartwright. She is, in The Marvels, she's Monica Rambeau. She's great in this movie, and she was pretty good in that movie, too. We've also got Coleman Domingo as William Burke, and it features spectacular, if short, appearances from Michael Hargrove as Sherman Fields, Vanessa Williams, no, not that one, reprising her role as Anne-Marie McCoy, and of course it features the great Tony Todd returning as Daniel Robitaille, the first Candyman. Just as a note, there's the original Candyman, there were two sequels, which I feel like this one ignored, which is fine, because they were very ignorable. And Tony Todd had been approached to reprise his role as the Candyman before, and he turned it down because it was due to the success of Freddy vs. Jason that they had a script ready to go, or were working on a production of Candyman versus Leprechaun, and Tony Todd's response was, "No, I will not be involved in anything like that, thank you."
And also, go fuck yourself.
Yeah, because Tony Todd is a badass.
Yes, he is.
And, of course, this movie features the puppetry skills of a company called Manual Cinema, which is local to Chicago, and it added a really great touch to this whole movie.
Yes, indeed. By the way, I wanted to point out that Yahya Abdul-Mateen II was in Matrix Resurrection, which was terrible. I didn't like that movie. But he did play Cal Abar, or a.k.a. Dr. Manhattan, in the Watchmen series. And that movie, I mean, that show fucking ruled.
Nice.
Really good. And,
I have not seen either of those, but I saw that in The Matrix Resurrections he plays Morpheus and Agent Smith.
It's, because there's identity weirdness going on. That movie sucks. People really liked it. I didn't care for it. In my opinion, it's more important. So,
yeah. I mean, to be fair, everything after the first Matrix was pretty bad.
That's true. Matrix 3 was unbearably bad.
Yeah. There was that thing with the albino knife twins, I remember. They really tried to play those up on the movie posters, and I'm just like, what's happening? Why are we playing this game with the Matrix? But, it's whatever.
Albino knife twins. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. Jordan Peele was originally slated to direct this movie, but he did not. And instead they went with DaCosta, who, as it turns out, is the first black woman in history to have a film open at number 1. Nice. First black woman director. Yeah, so that's pretty cool. And that goes in line with, hey, we're celebrating Black History Month. And, so that's good stuff. And we wanted to kind of showcase some, some of the stuff in black horror that we are fans of, so yeah, that's why we're here today.
Indeed, yeah. Jordan Peele stayed on as a producer and helped was one of the writers of the script. There's one joke in here in particular that the instant it hit, I was like, oh yeah, that's definitely a Jordan Peele joke.
Quite Peele-ish.
Yes. And let's see. Did you end up rewatching any of the original films?
No, I didn't. I stuck with this one, and I've only seen the original. I never bothered to watch any of the sequels, and even then,
there's no reason to.
Yeah, and even then, the original I only watched like a few years ago, and it was really good. I mean, I always thought it was going to suck for some reason. I don't know why, and so I just avoided it. Maybe I wouldn't have liked it back when it came out, but yeah, I really liked it when I saw it. I enjoyed it. It's crazy because apparently the first use of Candyman as a character was in, of course, he's a Clive Barker character, but he was in that book Weave World, which isn't really even a horror novel. It's when he kind of went off onto his weird fantasy direction. But then he also wrote a short story about Candyman, which I've never read, actually. I wonder if it's any good. I don't know. Have you read it?
I haven't. Actually, it was in reviewing the originals. It was I watched the entire original movie, and I was listening to the way that things were phrased and stuff. I was like, wow, I bet Candyman would really get along with Pinhead. This has some Hellraiser vibes. And then in the opening credits for Candyman 2, it was written by Clive Barker. And I was like, oh shit, what? And so I went down the rabbit hole. I was like, oh yeah, okay, yeah, this is his shindig. Very cool. Yeah.
He wrote the screenplay for the second film, or is just based on his character?
Just based on his story and characters. Yeah. He was just oh yeah, you can turn it into a movie. And then the first one was very much it's wild to me that the crossover that they wanted to go for was Candyman versus Leprechaun, because Candyman versus Pinhead is definitely an obvious choice.
Yeah, but probably would have been easier to get the clearance unless the movie rights to the character belonged to the studio or something, which, I mean, they know they had issues with. I forget what the studio was that made it, so, whatever, who cares?
Yeah, the business of movie making can very go fuck itself is basically the thesis of this entire podcast.
Yeah, pretty much. No shit.
But yeah, it's pretty good. I enjoyed this. We'll get into it, but let's are there any other tidbits you wanted to go over before we dive on into the honey-coated meat of this film?
Well, the original story is kind of based around a project in Chicago, which is infamous, for being a dangerous place and, just a pretty horrible housing project altogether. But a ton of people came from out of there, and it has a huge history. And this movie really, as a direct sequel, goes back and revisits the area, which has of course been gentrified, and that's a big part of this story. But it also takes place in part in an abandoned housing project, which is the same housing project that apparently was used in the first film. So that's actually really cool.
Yep.
And yeah, I like this film too, but it'll be fun to talk about it. But no, I think that's about it, really.
Yeah, those row homes were the actual Cabrini Green row homes. They still exist, but the giant Cabrini Green high-rise building from the original, that one's gone, so they had to CGI that back in.
Oh, okay, that's cool. I didn't even catch that. The Tiana Paris, she was also on that Showtime series Chirac, which is basically about the urban black community in Chicago. So it's
Oh yeah.
I mean, I wonder if she's maybe a Chicago actress or if it's just a coincidence.
Well, if you look at the people in here, a lot of the people in this movie have been in 2 television series, one called Chicago PD and another called Chicago Fire. So I think, and I know that Manual Cinema is a local Chicago thing. They had a big thing about let's bring in local talent from the area for this movie, which I appreciate, because one of the things that was kind of shitty about the sequels, Candyman 2 and 3, is they were like, let's relocate it. Let's do one in New Orleans and let's do another in I don't care, somewhere with people that speak Spanish. And so they proceeded to do that.
Wow, those 2 facts right there are 2 things. Those are the only 2 things I now know about those movies, except that I've heard they sucked.
Yeah. They proceed to be about white women being menaced by Candyman, and the last one they were like, let's just go ahead and get a porn tits. Let's have it be starring porn tits.
Wow. Thank you, Hollywood, you soulless bastard.
Yes.
Jesus Christ. Take a series which, to be fair, is based around a character written by an incredibly white dude. I mean, Clive Barker probably doesn't have a lot of street smarts. He's pretty fucking white. I mean, he's a weirdo, but he's not a soulful dude. So,
yeah.
So I guess that's kind of a dubious starting point, but I mean, the black culture, and particularly black culture in Chicago, and of course the intertwining of racism, which is impossible to disconnect from black culture, is at least in the U.S. for sure, is a big part of this movie and a big part of the original. And I mean, it's a really big part of this movie, and it's I guess it's just as much a part of the original, except that they don't really pound it into you like this movie does.
Yeah, the original, I feel like the original was progressive for its time, time being 1991, and so there, the setting is the projects, but also it's about this white female college student who's just interested in it for cool college reasons, and this one brings it a little bit more realistically into, not realistically, but more into a place of personal meaning, whereas the original was just hapless white lady stumbles into black people trouble, and this one is more about one's self and one's place in the greater tragedy that our society is creating and has created and is continuing to create. It's interesting. I'll say the original was good. I enjoyed it and I applaud it for the things that it did. This one is very interesting in the realm of sequels that do something new, that aren't just recreating the original, actually progressing it forward. This one does some stuff.
I very much like that. I think it's kind of cool that they kept the title without, putting a number on it. I know that's a contemporary thing. Yeah. In the case of this story, I think it really works because it's a story about something a cycle of something that repeats itself over and over. That's, like a loop of horribleness, basically. So keeping the title the same is kind of cool. Because, anytime someone wants to identify it, they just attach the ear to it. It's not a big deal. The other thing that I think is crucial about this film is that it's told from a black perspective. And, I mean, that's what this story deserved all along. So, it doesn't feel shoehorned, even considering that it's 29 years after the original. But, so let's talk about it, I guess.
Let's get on in. John, why don't you kick us off?
Oh, man, I'm good. So we hear the dulcet tones of Sammy Davis Jr. singing Candyman, and it's starting to distort and warble as the movie opens. We get some credits. We hear bee sounds. Good times. We see a little boy doing a shadow puppet show, and this is at the Cabrini Projects, 1977. Movie has started where the boy's off to do laundry. Apparently the laundry room is... It made it seem like miles away, but whatever. The kid's walking off to go do the laundry as he's passing. He passes a cop car as he's about to enter in the laundry building. One of the cops waves a flyer outside, the missing person flyer at him, and just kind of like, "Hey, kid." And then whatever. He goes inside. When he goes downstairs, there's a huge hole in the wall adjacent to the entrance to the laundry room. He's creeped out, as it would be any child. But anyways, he goes in, does his laundry, loads up his laundry, and he comes out. As he's walking out, a piece of candy flies out of the hole and lands on the ground. And the kid looks up and sees a giant male figure in a huge brownish tan overcoaty thing with faux lamb fur. It's Candyman. And he steps out of the hole, and he's got the fish hook arm. It's bloody. We hear screams, we see the cops, we hear screams, and then we get the full credit sequence, which is an upside down skyline, the reverse of the right side up skyline that you see in the original film. A nice little touch, or whatever. Music was very creepy. This is a Hollywood film, so the sound quality is very good. The music is very dramatic, but I thought it was decent. I think they did a good job with the soundtrack. They didn't, again, I think, because white people didn't make it, it's not full of, like, cutting-edge hip-hop and stuff that, so they can show everybody how cool they are. It's just got a soundtrack. So we cut to 2019. We see a couple walking down the street. I get the impression that they're gay, and of course they turned out to be gay. It doesn't really make that much of a difference to the story. It is kind of interesting. They're the only... they're first two gay characters in the entire history of the Candyman franchise, apparently. So,
oh wow, nice.
That's kind of interesting. So, anyways, they're walking down the street.
They're also interracial.
They're interracial. That's right, and talking a bunch of shit. They show up at the apartment of the main character Tony and his lady Brianna. We find out that you don't find it right away, but after the dinner, you find out that Troy is from the couple is Brianna's brother. But anyways, and that's his boyfriend. So Tony's chatting with the dudes at the apartment, and they start talking about the local art scene, and Troy is kind of talking about some, like the myth or the scary history of the Cabrini Green area, and then they talk a little bit about gentrification, and then Troy sets the scene, and turns out all the lights, and he's got all these candles lit, and he tells this scary story. And as he's telling the story, we see the shadow puppets again, and he basically gives the basic outline of the Helen Lyle story from the original movie, how she does her research in the Cabrini Green area, and how she eventually, as the story goes, snaps and kills the fuck out of some Cabrini Green locals. That she abducts a baby and shows up to the annual bonfire that they have, which I don't know if that's really a thing, because I would imagine the cops wouldn't be too happy about an annual housing project bonfire. But anyways,
so that's even brought up later in the movie. There's it's part of reframing events in a way to make the black community seem to be at fault. There's like a headline later where it's like, woman dies in illegal bonfire, and it's just like every year they have a bonfire, but this was the year that the police decided to do something about it.
Yeah,
because a lady died.
Yeah, another sign that the film is made by, that this is a black film, because they're, the black people aren't all heroes, or they aren't all bad. They're, much more ambiguous, like actual people. Go figure. Some are bad, some are good. They have a lot of problems in their community, just like any other community. Oh, wow, they're human.
Yep.
What a revelation. Anyways, so she shows up at the bonfire with the baby, but the crowd that's gathered gets the baby away from her. She tortures herself in the fire. We all know this if we've seen the original film. And, great. So he tells this story. Brianna's spooked. Tony's inspired. The crew leaves, and Tony tells Helen, as they're laying in bed later that night, he's on his phone, tells Brianna that apparently this Helen lady actually did kill a Rottweiler, which was part of the story. Okay, great. We cut to Tony. He's being lectured by a gallerist on how he needs to have new work. I think the guy's name is Clive? No, Clive I think is the boyfriend of Troy.
No, it's Clive.
It's Clive, right. Okay, yeah. So he's being lectured by Clive, who's a complete douche, and it's pretty funny because he's just a stereotypical gallerist asshole. He's basically telling Tony, you got to make new work, you're kind of dried up here, and blah, blah, blah. And Tony pitches this idea, based around the little bit that he knows about the Candyman myth, that he wants to integrate these ideas of gentrification and, stuff about the culture in Cabrini Green. Now, he's from the south side of Chicago. He's not from Cabrini Green. And they want you to know that because it won't matter later, or maybe it will. No. So anyways, he heads to the gallerist loves it because, he just sees dollar signs or whatever. So Tony heads off to the original location. And, that's right, because the guy says, well, south side of Chicago, that's kind of played out, and then Tony says something like, well, what about if I did it about Cabrini Green? And then Clive's like, boing, 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 boing. So he heads off to Cabrini Green. He sees the church, the church from the first movie. We hear bzz, 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 and he gets bit on his hand, swats the bee, which falls to the ground and is apparently consumed by a shit ton of other bees. I know.
It was ants. It was just all of a sudden 1,000 ants were there to eat the bee. Yeah, there's some weird shit going on. He climbs the fence at the abandoned housing project, and he's snooping around. He finds it apart. He goes into one of the apartments. It's covered in graffiti. He gets kind of spooked. Thinks he sees something move, which, because he probably saw something move. He sees a Candyman image painted on the wall, which freaks him out. And then he heads out, and this local guy stops him. And it turns out that he's William, the kid from the original opening scene doing the shadow puppetry, because everybody in this movie is an accomplished artist. They go to William's laundromat, and William is telling him the whole story about Candyman's origin, about how this local guy, what's the name, Robitaille, had gotten in trouble because somebody was killing children by giving them candy and putting razors in the candy. So the cops basically track this guy down and murderize him and cut his arm off. And no, that comes later. That comes later. So the guy that they're hunting in the 1970s, that's Sherman Fields. Daniel Robitaille was the original guy. So Sherman Fields already had a hook for a hand.
That's right. That's right.
Like a prosthetic hook.
That's right. Yeah. The cops run into the apartment building. You can hear them storming around. It's the loudest apartment building I've ever heard. In the meantime, William is downstairs, and he's completely mortified because he's basically face to face with Sherman, who, as we learn later, was actually harmless. Anyways, so the cops figure out where William is. They take William away and run down the stairs and beat the fucking daylights out of Sherman to death. So, yeah, that had to hurt. We hear the beezy buzzies, and then a couple weeks later, they find more razor blades in the candy. Thus, Sherman was not the dude. and then Sherman's dead, and that's the end of the movie. Oh, wait. Sherman comes back as the Man of Candy.
Yes.
That's how the story goes, anyway. So Tony starts working again now. He's super inspired. Maybe he's possessed. Who can say? Anyways, he's super inspired. He's really psyched to show Brianna his new body of work, or his new idea, basically, how he's executing it. How it's all about the story of Candyman. She's not into it. He's completely he's balls deep into it. Yeah. He mentions that if you say his name 5 times, then he shows up and, murderizes you. And he has this great idea that he's going to summon the Candyman. So he's basically teasing her. They're sitting on the couch. He says it 4 times. She gets all upset. He says it again. And then they all, no, you know. And then she sees his bee sting and is like, oh, what happened there? Oh, my goodness. And it's ridiculous because his bee sting looks like a gigantic cancerous tumor on the back of his hand.
It's instantly the worst.
We're just supposed to accept that it's a bee sting, or that she is anyway. Yeah. We know what it is, but if she's kind of like, oh, bee sting, okay.
Gross. So zoom forward, and now they're at the art show. We see, like, the gallery is full of people. Everyone's drinking. There's a snobby teenage girl there, and she's looking at his art exhibit. It's bathroom mirrors, like the kind that one would open and behind it keep all of their ointments and pills. And she's got the little printout of instructions telling you to look in the mirror and say Candyman 5 times. Then she leaves. We now see a snobby art critic, and she's looking at the piece and rolling her eyes. Anthony is there explaining the piece to her while other people are talking about how they wish he would not be, like, bothering the art critic and explaining the piece to her. And then the everything goes sideways. He makes a comedic exit. The Jordan Peele joke in question is, he says something like, you need a morning after pill budget for your intern, and the art gallerist is like, that wasn't spontaneous, he had that one in the bank. And I was like, yep, that's a Jordan Peele joke right there. That whole
character, I think, is like a Jordan Peele joke to me, with the Joy Division.
The Joy Division girl, yeah, exactly. After the gallery is over, or the show is over, Clive is grousing to his sex intern about the show, and then every time he says anything, she responds with a lyric, or mostly just a title of a Joy Division track, which... This scene made me realize I've never listened to Joy Division, so I went and I listened to some Joy Division songs, and they're fine. I don't understand why someone would be a huge Joy Division fanatic, but that's, I don't understand that with, like, most bands, so, yeah.
I'm well, I don't know if I'd say I'm a fanatic, but I'm definitely a big fan of Joy Division. I have everything they recorded in one single box set.
Nice.
It's like my prized possession that I never listen to because I don't listen to CDs anymore.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I thought it was funny because she's like, wow, what an atrocity exhibition. And then he says something later and she's like, love will tear us apart. And he's like, all right, we get it. You love Joy Division.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then later, by the way, when I was reading about this movie way back when I first saw it, way back in 21 or whatever.
Yeah.
I stumbled across this website that was like an auction for movie crap. Like
nice.
Stuff that, like props in movies. And they were selling that t-shirt. It was like up for auction.
Nice.
And I'm like, so it's just basically a generic, the one that everybody knows, the, infamous Joy Division t-shirt. But it just happens to be the one that girl wears in the movie. She probably had like 15 of them because they're like covered in blood and everything.
Yeah.
Or are they?
Oh.
Sorry.
It's fine. I'll have to dive further in. I on an initial listen to like 2 songs, I was like, okay, it just seems kind of subtle.
They can be a difficult listen because their music is so raw. I mean, it has a punk rock aesthetic, but it has it's very much a post-punk kind of thing. I mean, they were only around for a few years. And,
I didn't know that.
They had their singer hanged himself on the eve of their American tour. He was an epileptic. He was notorious for dancing really funny on stage, and nobody was ever really sure if he wasn't just having seizures or just danced funny.
Nice.
Yeah. So he got cold feet. He was having a lot of personal problems, and he was at home listening to The Idiot, the Iggy Pop record, and watching Werner Herzog's one of his movies. Let's just say that. And they opened the door. This record was on its like locked groove, the Iggy Pop record, and that movie was playing apparently, which is really depressing. Yeah.
Yeah. She keeps saying all of these Joy Division things. She has the T-shirt. It does get in blood, covered in blood, because as they start making out, she decides to say Candyman 5 times. And then she does, and then she gets jugulared to death.
The pulmonary pressure of the folks in this movie is extremely high. I don't know that it's as high as, say, a Japanese splatter film where everyone bleeds mist, but super high pressure mist. But in this movie, people bleed like huge wads of just exploding blood. Basically, it's kind of awesome.
It really is. It's a fountain effect, and it really works here because he's like holding her from behind. The jugular gets open, and then it's just fountaining blood out, and he's like, "Is this real?"
I know, he thinks it's an art thing.
Yeah. He also then quotes the movie Jurassic Park by saying "must go faster" twice, which is very distracting. But that happens, and then he gets more menaced instead of insta-dead like she did, and it does the Achilles tendon, and then get him. You see screen get ripped, you see Candyman in the mirror holding him up, while in real life he's just being held up by invisible nothingness, and then he is also dead. The next day, Brianna discovers their bodies, and we see this mixed in with her memories of her artist father jumping out of the window after turning back to her and saying, "Did you know your father can fly?" So we see that she has personal trauma related to artistry and death and all of this stuff. This is also a place where the movie starts getting a little weird with like time and when is this happening versus when is that happening. We find out that she found them dead before we see her finding them dead. It's very strange and a little confusing, but it's part of this movie's. This movie is rewarding whenever you rewatch it. It's better than the first watch, in my opinion.
I agree.
And then later they're at the apartment, they're watching the news, and on the news, Anthony is excited because his name gets mentioned, as well as it being in relation to the piece of art at the gallery, so he's all excited. And Brianna and her brother are just staring at him because, like, what a fucked up reaction to hearing about his friends being killed. And then Brianna wakes up in the middle of the night after having a dream about the Candyman being in her bathroom. When she wakes up, Anthony is in the bathroom and he's acting strange and locks her out of the bathroom so that he can run water over his bee sting. We then see that he's inspired and he's painting furiously, creating new works. His bee sting is swollen, scabby, obviously painful, and it's starting to really progress up his arm. Maybe not a bee sting, but, you know, a bee sting.
Yeah, it's starting to look curiously like scar tissue from a fire.
Yeah, it's got the not quite honeycomb aesthetic, but almost.
Fucking up with my trypophobia.
Yeah. Yeah, all of the little holes. Not good.
I was like, oh, God. Oh.
There it is. And then for some reason he goes and he visits the bitch art critic from earlier in the movie. She is all buddying up to him now because of the murders. Now all of a sudden his art feels eternal, according to her. He tells her that if she really wants to connect with the piece, she should go Candyman herself in the mirror.
But in the meantime, Anthony is picking his scab in the living room, his little latex patch scab, until it suddenly occurs to him that it hurts like a bitch. And then he gets up and, by the way, I was watching it with headphones, and you can hear, her record player must be on, because you can hear, speaking of locked grooves, you can hear the
nice.
barely in the touch. But then I was like, It was a little distracting because then I'm like, were they listening to records? I don't know that they were. But anyways, so he gets up, he finds like some kind of towel or something, probably that she uses to clean her records, and wraps it around his disgusting hand, and decides to head out towards the bathroom, because that's what you do. And, yeah, I mean, why not? He goes to find Finley. Her name is Finley, which is perfect. So like you said, he sees Candyman in the reflection, all that crazy shit happens. Get the scene where he's like gesticulating in the mirror, and then she opens the door and she's like, what the fuck are you doing? And he's like, gotta go. And he like bolts out the door, and then we get an outside shot, and we realize that she lives in that building in Chicago that has the crazy like curved windows, that circular building that's real like an architectural recognizable. Yeah. So anyways, the camera's pulling back from outside, and we see her get smacked against the glass and just like dragged across the window, leaving a blood trail. And of course you can't see the Candyman, but it's the Candyman.
Yeah, it's a really great shot. I love that shot because we're all the way away. We're like just in the middle of the air, staring at the side of this high rise. It's so artfully done. It's one of the great things about this movie is they get all of these fantastic shots that are just instantly burned into your memory.
Yeah, I agree. It does work. In this movie at several points visually, it's very effective. So we cut back to Brianna's dinner that she's having with the museum people, where she's trying to doll up to get her curator position. And Tony's there. Of course, he's completely distracted, picking at his goopy hand, a la Dans ma peur. He's like picking away at his hand.
I didn't even think about it, but yeah.
I was like, wow, this feels familiar. In the meantime, she's trying to she's trying to put the shine on her guests so she can, get this job. And they're talking, blah, 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 talking about the museum. They're telling her, they're trying to sell the position to her. And then all of a sudden, everybody's phone goes, and everybody gets a text at the same time about the the art critic that got slaughtered in her own home. And Tony freaks the fuck out and gets spooked and just says, I gotta go, and gets up and runs away from the table. That's good.
That's not sus.
He hunts down William Burke, and we get more. We get the fleshed out version of the Candyman story, all accompanied by lovely shadow puppets. So we hear about a guy who was an artist, this black guy from Cabrini Green named Robitaille, who makes the mistake of we don't hear about Robitaille. We hear about Sherman.
We do, but he's Robitaille is not Cabrini Green.
Oh, he's not from Cabrini Green. Oh, okay. He's from New Orleans, right. I guess. That's why his name's Robitaille. Yeah. It's probably more they get the New Orleans thing in the later movie that I probably will watch one day, even though I'm an idiot.
The second one's worth watching. The third one, don't even bother.
It's not worth it. The second one is the New Orleans one. So we hear about this black dude who is definitely not an artist named Robitaille, who makes a terrible mistake of he is an artist, right? Because he's supposed to do a portrait of this white patron, this lady, and he makes the cardinal sin of showing interest in her, and word gets out, and the locals all fuck him up, as in kill him. But they cut his arm off, and they shove a gigantic meat hook in his stump, and cover him in local honeycomb so that the bees will bite him. That moment there, I was like, wait, what? Local honeycomb? Okay, that's fine.
Yeah.
And then they torch him in front of the gathered crowd, which has become a cycle which, as I describes it, personifies hatred and retribution. Kind of. Because it's not entirely clear for me. But we'll get to that.
Yeah.
Back home, Brianna comes across his work, which is, like Francis Bacon weird now. It's very thick paint. looks really cool. I think they actually got a decent artist to do the artwork for this movie. Because usually when the main character in a movie is an artist, he's either terrible or he's like a cartoonish style illustrator, but his art is supposed to be really serious. But it always looks like pristine and something's not right. That's an aside that I probably didn't need to do. Anyways, she comes home and she sees his work, but he doesn't want her to see it because, now he knows he's still a little bit in the precipice between Loco and Anthony. So he slaps some loose canvas over one, doesn't cover anything, but
he really sucks at covering canvases. We watch it happen
really
for way
did
too
not
long.
do
He's like,
it's like, oh great, is there a percentage that she has to see in order to be affected, or what's the deal? So he basically tells her he's afraid because he suspects, well, he doesn't, he believes that he's brought Candyman back. Of course, she thinks he's batshit. And, I mean, he is batshit at this point, but he's also right. So she, to prove him wrong, she starts saying Candyman, and he freaks the fuck out in front of the mirror, of course, because they just happen to have a mirror right there. He freaks the fuck out, smashes the mirror, and she leaves, which is probably a good call.
Yeah.
She's now at Troy and Grady's place. That's right, Grady is his dude.
Yeah, he looks like a Grady.
A Grady. Troy is lecturing her about how Candyman is complete bullshit, and Anthony is a complete nut job. And he suggests that instead of worrying about all that, it would be a really good idea if she did an art show of their father's work as some form of catharsis, which makes no fucking sense at all.
Yeah. What are you doing, Troy?
You're really upset because your artist husband is losing it, so maybe the way to deal with it is to do an art show of your artist father's work, the artist who jumped out a window in front of you because okay, whatever, that's fine.
It's fine,
so,
Troy.
So now we've got the crazy family stuff is just surrounding this poor lady. Then we cut to the most worthless part of the movie, but I'm glad they put it in there anyway because it's such a cool scene. We're in a high school, and it's in the girls' room, and there's a group of teenage girls, and they want to do the Candyman thing. And so they're all standing in the mirror. I guess the implication is that this story has come back into the public consciousness because of the murders. And so these girls are just riffing off of what they've heard because that's what kids do.
Yeah.
As far as, like... Go ahead.
Well, one of them was the snobby girl at the gallery earlier. So, she was looking at the art piece and got the little piece of paper with the instructions, and then is now sharing it with her white friends at school,
her cohorts.
Yeah.
So they stand in a line in front of the mirror. It's really silly, and they start saying, Candyman, and then one of the girls freaks out, and she's like, "Fuck yeah, guys, this is fucking crazy." And then she leaves. And another girl comes in and goes in to drop a duker and puts her ear things in, so of course she doesn't hear what's about to happen. The girls say the fifth Candyman, and nothing happens, and they're like, "Fuck this, I'm out of here too." And then they start to head for the door, and the door is locked. Right. Somehow the door is locked. So one of the girls goes back in around, she hears something, they're all kind of congregating around the shitter, and this one girl walks around the side over to where the mirror is, and we hear and then splat, and another girl looks down under the stall and sees a sheet of blood just pouring down onto the floor.
It's like a membrane.
It's so weird. And then basically we cut to the POV of the girl in the shitter who has, I liked her backpack hanging on the thing with a Bad Brains patch on the back. I thought that was a nice touch.
Yeah.
She takes her earbud out and hears these girls just get fucking annihilated. One of the girls' compact falls on the ground and it's open, and you can see in the reflection Candyman destroying one of the girls. It's a pretty cool scene, I have to admit.
It really is.
as I wrote, he shows up to motherfuck them up to ultra death.
Yeah, pretty much, yes.
So, kind of a pointless scene, but it was so great. I mean, I wish more of the movie was that disgusting.
Yeah.
Some of it is, but that was just gratuitous violence, and it was wonderful.
Yeah.
We cut to Anthony waking up. He's now basically just goopy. He's got like chunks of broken mirror in his hand. Yeah, I wonder why. His nails are falling off. His hand is all withered. He's got he just looks horrible. He's got one cloudy eye. Great. So now we cut to Brianna, who's at the museum. She's got the gig. She's talking to, I believe it's the director of the museum, whatever, it doesn't matter. But they're talking about Clive and Joy Division's death. And she brings up Anthony and how his work is, there's a buzz about his work, as she says. And then she mentions her father and his work and how, that what a great connection that this all comes full circle. For some reason, Brianna doesn't see it as cool as the director does. Back to Tony, or Anthony, and he's in the hospital because, his hand is turning into dried meat. And he's sitting on a hospital bed watching a TV, and there's a news story about the massacre of the girls in the prep school. So the nurse comes in and tells him that his records show him that he was not born in the South Side. He was born in Cabrini Green, after all. And he's like, well, but there must be something wrong. And then he leaves and goes to his mother's place because I guess he wants to find out why she lied to him. Well, that is why. And so he goes there. He looks super ass at this point. He's completely holed up and just gross.
Yeah, little baby frogs are about to pop out of his entire right side.
Exactly. It's so disgusting. He just looks ass. He has a really weird, awkward talk with his mother, and she tells him more about the mythology or the story of Candyman. And they're sitting really close to each other on the couch. I thought they were going to start making out or something. It was really, I don't know. It was the dynamic between those two was a little weird. So basically, she explains to him that she lied about. He was born in Cabrini Green, of course, and she lied about it because she wanted to, quote, protect him from the truth. And it turns out that he was the baby that Helen supposedly took back in the day. And that what happened is, the mother came home, I think it was, and she found Helen covered in blood, holding the baby, and Helen bolted out of the apartment. And, as it turns out, it wasn't Helen, that she had actually taken him from Candyman and then rushed outside, and the baby was saved, but she got torched in the fire, but managed to stab Candyman to not actually death because he's already dead. And now he's found Anthony because the story got out, which somehow broke a seal of creepiness that made him whatever. Don't look too far into it. So Anthony's like, "Wow, Mom, you're a whore," and then he leaves, and he gets the fuck out of there because probably a good idea.
Yeah, probably.
He got what he wanted out of it.
Yeah. There's this whole line throughout the movie where, she's been trying to get in touch with him, but he won't, answer her calls and stuff, and it always felt like, why is that happening? And it turns out that this is why that's happening. It's fine.
And she's the real woman, by the way, that plays his mother in the first movie, apparently. That's crazy. Did you say that earlier?
Yeah, that's the same actress.
That's cool.
Her name is Vanessa Williams, and
that's right, Vanessa Williams.
So at this point, Brianna is looking for Anthony. She makes her way to Burke's laundromat. Burke being the kid that had seen the original or the 70s Candyman. He owns that laundromat, and she gets there to look for Anthony, and then with a trick of locked doors and spooky business, she ends up getting abducted. We see a further flashback to Burke's childhood where he remembers his sister and one of his sister's friends locking themselves into the bathroom to play Candyman, which they do, and they get Candyman to death. He opens the door, looks inside, there's a piece of candy on the floor, and he sees Candyman Sherman in the mirror doing a shh face. Which doesn't make sense, but it's fine. And so we see now that Burke has gone crazy. He's tied up Brianna in the church from the original movie and from here. He says he was baptized here, but he's on some new shit now. He's doing all of this great crazy guy stuff with his mouth. He calls the police and uses a white guy voice to tell them that the killer is here and that he's, actively killing people. So the idea is that the cops are going to show up, and he's explaining his master plan to Brianna. Anthony's there too. He's like out of it, and he just hands his arm over and doesn't complain as Burke saws his hand off, opens up a case. Apparently he has Candyman's original meat hook. I guess he got it off of eBay or something. He shoves it in there, ties it off. It's really good sound effects. It's really gross and squishy. And his plan is to bring back Candyman forever. And he puts a coat on him because all of the Candymans have a full-length coat of some kind, which I think is a pretty nice touch. And then he opens up his toolbox and pulls out 2 lollipops with razors in them, and he's like, it's time for the sacrament. But Brianna has used the pen that she found, Burke's laundromat pen, that she found it, and she used that to untie herself, and she now runs. And so he's chasing her around Cabrini Green. His mouth is now bleeding because he ate the razor blade candy sacrament. And he's singing Candyman with the Candyman because his mouth is bleeding, and chases her into that one row house with the broken mirror and the Candyman painting on it. There's this great scene where she tries to clobber him with an enormous piece of metal, but it's too heavy, so it falls back. Then she just ends up stabbing him over and over and over again with his own pen to death. All of a sudden, Anthony's there. He's like, I think he's dead. And then he collapses into her arms. And she's like trying to like help him. The cops show up at this point. We see everything turn strobing blue and red from the squad car lights. And she yells that he's in here. He's in here. She's asking for help. The cops bust into the room and immediately shoot Anthony 4 times while he's in her lap. And then we see her like come to terms with what's happening. His blood is all over her, and she is arrested, and she's put into the back of the squad car. A detective guy gets into the driver's seat and coerces her into telling a police convenient version of the story. She asks to see herself in the rearview mirror. He's like, no, and she's like, if you do it, I'll say whatever you want. I don't fucking care. So he moves the rearview mirror so that she can see herself in it. She says Candyman 5 times, and then Anthony Candyman shows up and kills all of the fucking cops one by one, and then he's just floating around the squad car in a circle, and every single window reflects a different Candyman face until all of a sudden now we haven't seen Daniel Robitaille, but now his face is completely obscured by bees. The detective guy gets out of the squad car and runs, and she gets out of the squad car because it is now opened because Candyman has door magic. Don't ever forget that Candyman has door magic. And so she gets out, she's handcuffed, and she goes to the sound of the detective being killed, and she goes and looks, and there's Candyman killing the detective, and then he does this awesome floaty, like, arms out saint float towards her, and as he gets closer, the bees obscuring his face start to fly away, and then she can see his face. It's Tony Todd, Daniel Robitaille, and he says, "Tell everyone." That's the end of the movie, but then it's the closing credits. The closing credits, and it's all to shadow puppets and this great little, like music box style music going on. The closing credits tell the stories of the various Candyman that we've seen in the movie, but then additional Candyman, because part of the thing is that it's a hive, that it keeps happening over and over again. The Candyman puppet stories that we see show those, as well as some stories that are very reminiscent to the death of Anthony Crawford, George Stinney, and James Byrd Jr. I will include links to those stories in the show notes.
Yeah, it's funny because they do things like that in this movie, and usually those are the kinds of things that I fucking hate in movies, where it just feels like, hey, we're gonna stuff this really serious shit in because as if we don't have enough confidence in our movie to be, serious enough. But it works for this movie. I don't know that these kinds of things work, and that's a powerful, super powerful thing. But anyways. So that James Byrd death, if you guys don't know, and you can read about it in the link, he was dragged to death by racists in East Texas, an area
Yeah.
So I was camping in one of the state parks up in Jasper, and Jasper is where all that happened. And when we went on that camping trip, we went and found his gravesite, which was pretty intense, and then we discovered the road because, internet, we discovered the road that he was dragged down. So we drove down that road, which was pretty daunting. And, it curves and then it goes all the way down and the road basically ends, or his
at the church.
Road ended, I guess, at the church where he attended. It's an all-black church. And there's a little cemetery to the side there. He's not buried there. He's buried in the main Jasper cemetery. But so we got out and we were looking around. There was a lot of handmade headstones and stuff. It was a pretty cool cemetery. And this guy comes out of the church and he's like sweeping the steps and stuff and kind of like eyeballing, like, what are these white people doing in our cemetery? And so the girl I was with was like, we should probably go. And I'm like, I don't want the guy to feel uncomfortable. I'm going to just kind of tell him, I actually researched this story a lot, and it was something that I wanted to write about for a blog, which is true. And so I start talking to this guy, and he was there at the time when this happened, and he tells me about that day and how when they dragged him down that street, he says, where you make that turn to the left? And I said, yeah. And he goes, that house right there, that driveway, they found his head in that driveway. And I was just like, oh, Jesus Christ, this is really intense. So, like, whenever I hear that guy's name, I just think about that trip to Jasper and how everybody seems so nice in Jasper and how such an awful thing happened there. I mean, it's just, wow. So, yeah, to see that in this movie, it was like, yeah, that's pretty heavy stuff.
It's heavy stuff. It doesn't shy away from it. I've seen people criticize it for trying to cover too many topics, but not really going in depth on them. And I don't think that's fair, because one of the things I like about this movie is there are all of these problems. Like, the police brutality is almost like a thing that you forget about. It's a thing that happens twice in this movie, and it's almost like the characters are wrapped up in their own problems. There's an awareness of the fact that they have problems because of their race that's just out of their control, but they're also just experiencing their day-to-day life problems, their own personal traumas that have nothing to do with that. And then also it's a thing that, rears its ugly head again. And I thought that was really good, because this isn't a movie that's just about racism. It's not just a movie about like the systemic horrors visited upon Black individuals and Black communities. It's also about just individuals having their own things going on, their own traumas, their own trying to create their own path to success and personal fulfillment in the world. And then also it's getting slammed into these other forces outside of them. And like the way that it handled that was really interesting. The movie doesn't hold your hand. Like it doesn't like spell everything out. It makes you interpret, and it makes you engage with it, which is what good art should do. And I ended up giving it a 5 out of 5 loathsome things, just because I couldn't find a place to deduct points, basically. Like, there are parts of it that are confusing and parts of it that don't make sense, but that's every single horror movie, and a lot of the things here that don't make sense are Clive Barker in origin, and I feel like it did a good job of keeping that intact, building off of it, and improving what already existed. So yeah, it's a 5 out of 5 from me.
Yeah, I mean, pretty much agree with everything you said. I mean, the handling of one of the things that I liked was the idea that, gentrification isn't only, white people coming in. There's that whole scene where art critic Finley, where she's standing there looking at his artwork and she says, "Oh, you're one of those kind," or so, "your kind." She refers to his kind, and he's like, "Ugh. Excuse me." And she's like, artists who come in and gentrify a neighborhood, and it's like, like we're just supposed to overlook the fact, that we all know exactly what that phrase means. I mean, it's, I gave the movie a 3.85. I really enjoyed it. I think I would have, I don't know if I took away maybe a little bit because it's riffing on another idea, but at the same time, I don't really have it. It's not like I have an issue with that. So there was a couple things that I thought it was a little convoluted in places. Even though I've seen it multiple times, I still kind of get lost a little bit in the middle section. But it doesn't, having said that, it doesn't drag. I think one of the things I would have liked to see was more of the actual Candyman himself. I mean, especially the reveal was great, but it should have been operatically great. And I think they missed that by a little bit. And it's unfortunate. The other thing that one of the problems I have with the whole Candyman mythology is the fucking bees thing. I never understood the bees thing. It's cool. It looks really cool, and it is really creepy, but I don't understand it. Like, why the fuck bees, like, what? I don't know. That's just a personal thing, but, no, I gave it a 3.85. I think it's a really fun movie. I agree with you. It definitely bears repeat viewings. There's a lot of stuff that, I mean, I still enjoyed it, but there's a lot of, the first time I saw it, but, since, there's a lot of things that I've picked up, and obviously there's a lot of things that I didn't pick up, because you had to correct me on a bunch of stuff, but, so I mean, maybe I'm rating my viewing of the movie. I give myself a 3.85 watching Candyman, because I missed a bunch of shit.
No, I think it's a fair rating. Like, there are problems with it, and there are parts where it gets confusing. Like, I had to like really pay attention, and it wasn't even until we were talking about it today that you pointed it out. Like, I just thought of the scene with the schoolgirls dying in the girls' bathroom. I just thought of it as like a building thing, but in you pointing out the fact that it didn't have anything to do with it, it made me stop and think about it, and I realize now that the idea there is the reason that those girls died in the bathroom by Candyman was to make it so that the cops would be after Anthony.
That's true. That makes sense. Yeah, you're right about that.
Yeah.
It felt weird to me, but all the things that felt weird to me made sense either when I watched it again or when you explained it to me.
Yeah.
But, I don't even think that takes away from it for me. I think that's just me, not investing, as much of myself into it as I should have. I mean, because it's a horror movie, and I took it, it's not like I'm overlooking, what's going on beneath the surface, but at the same time, for me, I wanted it to be first and foremost a horror movie, which it is. And, considering how well they handled the horror elements, I wish they had put more of them in, because it's essentially a slasher, it's like an urban myth slasher, with heavy social undertones or overtones, or however you want to describe that. But, and it's very effective at that. But I guess I would have wanted more of, even though I'm not a huge fan of slashers, but I like the way this works as a slasher, I would have liked more of the slashery element, which is, there's more of that kind of pulpiness in the first movie for sure, even though it is really kind of cartoonish, but that's the 80s. I mean, well, 90s, whatever, early 90s, but, But anyways, cool movie. I mean, I really enjoyed it. It's, I think it's indicative of a huge change in black entertainment, where we're basically seeing not really the birth, but more of the coalescing of this genre of black horror. And obviously a lot of that is due to Jordan Peele, who had a very active role in making this film. but it's not only him. And speaking of, Black History Month, and it's time for me to select, well, I've already selected, but it's time for me to announce the movie that I have selected. Oh, shit.
What's it gonna be?
Well, and I have to admit it out loud that I had picked a different movie that I won't even mention, and then discovered that it was made by a white guy, and that the whole thrust of the entire film became racist because of that.
What you are currently listening to is us re-recording the end of the episode. And I was totally on board. I was like, yeah, it seemed like a challenging movie, but I mean, if a black guy directed it, then I'm sure it's okay.
But no, a Jewish white guy did. Oh my God. Oh, so I went about as far away from that as I could get, and picked a movie that I've already seen, that I can vouch for as a fine film. We are going to be reviewing on week 2 of our catastrophic month. We're going to be covering 2020's His House.
Oh,
directed
shit, yes.
by, oh God, what's his name? Remy Weeks. Yeah, nice. It's, I don't know if you've seen, I know we talked about it briefly sometime in the past, but it's really good.
It's like the refugee couple that, like, gets, like, shoved into emergency housing, and there's, like, a guy in the wall or something, right?
Yes, that's the one.
Nice. Yeah, I didn't, like, pay attention, but I remember what I saw was pretty tight. Also a little Candyman-esque, if I remember.
That's true, actually. Yeah, good point. It's very good. It's definitely, it's a nice mix of different elements, but it's absolutely a horror film too. And it's got Matt Smith in it, so that's always good.
Matt Smith, my favorite doctor. All doctors suck compared to Matt Smith. Very cool.
Yeah, best part. Oh, and by the way, I won't say it because it'll give it away. But anyways, His House, 2020. By Remy Weeks. Watch it and come listen to us in 2 weeks. In 2 weeks.
Weekus. Aha, nice.
Yeah. Well, there you go, folks.
There it is. So, go watch those things and be a good influence on the world.
Yeah. And as always, I'm sorry that